What if I told you that your business is set up to fail and that the failure of your business should excite you? Before that sounds like something you want to dismiss, just hear me out. There's a framework that's extremely important that's going to help put the failures that you experience on your entrepreneurial journey in the right context. I'm going to share something with you that's going to be frustrating, but I think the minute that we align on this framework, you're going to find yourself in a position to really start to see the true opportunities that you're encountering. This is both personal and professional. There's a framework called the corridor principle. This is one of the things that has had the biggest impact on me in terms of my entrepreneurial journey. The corridor principle says that you are never going to see the true opportunities until you're in the corridor. And what that means is you have to be on the field. You have to be in the game. You have to be in the battle. And yet, when you've entered the field, the game, the battle, the corridor, choose your analogy, you always enter from an arbitrary context. So here's what that means. You start a business, let's say, just to use an example that we're all maybe a little familiar with in web design. You start this business in web design and that puts you in the corridor. But as you're going through this web design business, you realize, gosh, web design is hard, web design is low margin, web design is saturated, they're starting to offshore, web design is changing, whatever ends up happening to you. But as you're eking out a living in this web design business, you begin to see this opportunity in integrating websites with this software application that you happen to know how to use. And now suddenly you start really making inroads into this integration business that has nothing to do with web design. But you never would have seen the opportunity had you not started your web design business. There's a myriad of examples of this. My favorite of all time is Henry Ford. Henry Ford is one of the most successful entrepreneurs of all time. And he wasn't just successful in his corridor. He was successful in a way that impacted how everybody else does everything. Henry Ford didn't invent the vehicle. People were already producing cars. He created the way that vehicles would be created in mass, which is how he won. It's how he reached critical mass. He didn't create the best car. He created the car that was the most affordable, the most accessible, the most scalable. And he did it because he worked at a sausage factory. Which is a true story, by the way. Henry Ford created the automobile assembly line based off of his experience at having worked at a sausage factory. Sausage has nothing to do with automobiles, and I imagine wasn't going to make him the literal billionaire that he ended up making adjusted for inflation. But that was the lesson that taught him what he needed to know in order to enter the fray. So the corridor principle is at play in a way that you're never going to know or understand. Success isn't linear, ever, for anyone. So getting out onto the field is your very first step, and then being nimble with how it is that you're approaching all of your entrepreneurial endeavors. It's a balance of risks because we hear so often, stay focused, stay the course, be persistent. I've said it myself. And that persistence doesn't need to mean petulance. If something's not working, or if something's difficult, or if you realize that something's not necessarily the right implementation for you, those mild micro adjustments that sometimes veer you off into an entirely different course, that's going to be the thing that really starts to yield results. The agency that I sold an agency in October 2022 for an 8-figure sum of money. It was a Google Ads agency. When I started that business a decade prior, it was a full funnel marketing agency that did literally everything for everybody. So I just showed up and I'm like, hey, if you want something done basically on a computer, right? If you want website design, software development, content creation, graphic design, SEO, PPC, video production, like there wasn't a service I didn't provide. I was horrible at all of it, but it put me in the corridor. Once I was in the corridor, I realized like, okay, video from an infrastructure perspective is really hard and you need really talented labor. And SEO is hard because there's all these algorithm changes. And web is hard because the costs keep going down because the offshore agencies are getting better at it, and so on and so forth. And I was able to figure out like, well, wait a minute, this Google Ads thing, I'm actually really good at it and there's a huge need for it. Flash forward, I built the biggest Google Ads agency in the world. I never would have known that Google Ads was a viable opportunity for me had I not entered the corridor. But I entered the corridor in the dumbest way with the dumbest business and the lowest margins, and it was hard and I wasn't making any money and I was pulling my hair out. And interestingly, even when I did make money, it was actually put me at a disadvantage because I'm making money in a way that I'm not necessarily competent or proficient in. And that's horrible money to capture because you're held accountable to a result that you don't really have any true impact on. I don't want to say this to discourage you. And I'm not saying set out to fail just so you can begin to see where the opportunities might be. The sad kind of idiosyncratic truth of the corridor principle is you generally don't see the successful opportunities unless you're trying in earnest to be successful. So stay the course, stay on what you're doing, be nimble, be flexible, be receptive, and get excited when things get frustrating or hard, because that's usually the opportunity. More often than not, opportunities come disguised as hardships. Using the original example I gave you as the integration thing, chances are there was something that your client says, oh, I have to have this integration in order for this to work. And now it's just a pain in your ass that you have to go figure out. Chances are your client says, I have to have this integration in order to work. And now it's just a pain that you have to go figure out this integration. Every time you feel frustrated, every time you run into a roadblock, every time you hit a brick wall, that's usually a wall that somebody else is hitting too. And those are the biggest entrepreneurial opportunities. So the quarter principle, get into the field, pay attention to frustrations, and then identify those as potential opportunities. And be nimble, be flexible. I hope this video was helpful. Obviously, I'd love to talk to you about comments you have, suggestions you have for other videos. If you want to help me and if this video has been helpful to you, share the video, share it with context, let other people know why this is making an impact, why they should watch it. I would be eternally grateful, and I'll see you in the next video.